Today we're going to step away from programming for a little bit to cover a tool that we've used in every single tutorial thus far, and that's the command line. Our goal for today is to unpack the command line, what it is, and take away some of the magic that sort of exists around it. This won't be the only tutorial I have about the command line, but this one's going to give you the tools to kind of unpack tools that you already have on your machine and understand what's going on when you type in some of the words that go along with following the tutorials that I make. When a lot of people think about the command line, they think about something they've seen on TV. There's a dark black background with lime green letters and a lot of text just flying by. And that's really kind of intimidating because you have no idea what's going on. So today I want to go through and look at what is actually going on when you type things into your shell. And then I also want to show you where your commands come from, just because that makes it a lot easier moving forward for you to understand why something goes wrong, because there aren't really that many reasons why something goes wrong. And the more you know on how to debug those, the better. Before we get started, I do want to stress kind of why I think the command line or shell is important, and that's just because it's so reproducible. Anything you do in the shell, you can do again because you have a history of the things that you've typed. And also you can take multiple commands that you've typed into your command line and you can package those into scripts and run them again or give them to somebody else to run. I use this a lot in my day job to automate tasks for other people if I've figured something out already, or we actually do this with a series of scripts to automate the entire setting up of a new developer's machine. This tutorial is about a Unix shell, which is going to be, for this, we're going to use a shell called bash, which thankfully, up until recently, you couldn't actually run bash on Windows very well. There were some ways to get around it, but now bash is supported on Windows, and there's an article over here on the MSDN, which is Microsoft's developer network, on how to install bash for Windows. You have to have the Windows 10 anniversary update, but if you have that, then you can actually use bash exactly like I'm using bash right now. So this should be something that you can follow along with regardless of what platform you're programming on. We aren't going to cover a ton of commands today, but the ones that I do want to cover are about exploring your file system and what's going on inside of the shell. So some of the most common commands that we use in our day-to-day development would be cd, which you've seen me use to change directory, and ls to list things out. And what's actually going on there is if I cd into my code directory, it changes my current working directory. And there is actually a command to print that out to you. It's pwd, print working directory. So you can see I'm at /users/explorer/code. My user on this particular machine is called Explorer for when I'm recording these things. So when you type in pwd, you'll get a very different path depending on what your user is and where your home is. And it should be quite a bit different on Windows if you're using bash for Windows. But it's saying that we're inside of the code directory underneath Explorer, which is in the users directory, and the slash at the beginning is the root of the file system. So you can actually see that too. So if I cd to here and I look at where I'm at just slash. And if I ls again, you'll see a lot of different things. And this is the base of your file system on a Unix machine. But let me go back to code. So we were at users, explorer, code. Oops. If I want to go back to my original folder, my home folder, there are a few different ways I can do it. I can cd ... which this is a relative path saying go back one path. And that will take me back to my home, which the tilde that you see next to the $, that shows the name of my current folder, and your home folder can be represented as a tilde. So if I look again, we're here. I'm going to cd back into code just so I can move around again. If I cd to tilde, it should take me back to the same spot. And then finally, we've seen this already, but if I cd to Explorer code, oh, whoops, we actually just want Explorer, and then it'll take me back. So these are the different ways that you can represent a directory or a file inside of the command line, and that is through a relative path, a absolute path, Or in a very special case for home, you can use this tilde thing. So there are actually really only two that you'll ever use besides this one to get back to your home directory. The next tool that I talked about was ls. So I don't actually have a mnemonic for ls besides list. I just think of listing things. But cd works, it's change directory. pwd works, print working directory. ls I don't have one for. If somebody knows one for it, that would be great. Just leave that in a comment somewhere. But ls will take the directory that you're currently in and it will print out its contents. And by default, I actually think it prints it out in kind of a weird way. It prints it out alphabetically in columns. So it goes this to, applications to desktop, to Docker file, to documents. And I don't think that's really that useful. But that brings us to the next thing that we get with a lot of our commands that we invoke from the command line. And those are flags. So ls has quite a few flags. One of the most common ones that I use is the -l flag. And this takes it and lists it out in an actual list format. And it gives you some extra information too. It tells you who owns it. It gives you the read-write permissions on it. And then it tells you the size and when it was last changed. There's also another flag that I use a lot, and that is a. So the most of the time when I use ls, I use ls-la, or actually I always type it al, but the ordering there doesn't actually matter. And what this does is it shows you the listing that we have before, but it also shows you invisible files. So like this .ssh directory is not something you'll see if you look in the Finder or if you look in Windows Explorer, but it does exist. And since it starts with a dot in Unix land, that just means, oh, make this hidden, don't show everybody. It's where you can put configuration files that you don't want people to really muck with, or if you just have files that are very specific to a lot of applications. These are for configuration files a lot of times. Now that I've shown you a couple of commands that we've used before, I'm sure, in these tutorials, but the reason I want you to have these is it gives you a little bit of mobility and it lets you sort of feel like you can move around through the shell, like you're going from place to place. It's not just that there's text on the page, it's that you are actually moving. But the other thing I want to talk about is like, where do these commands come from? Right now they just seem like magic words, but how do we get to them? And there's actually a command for that too. And I use this quite a bit too. It's called which. You can say which and then pass it a name of another command. So if we look at ls, it'll say that it's in /bin/ls, which means that there is literally an executable file in the /bin directory named ls. And that's what runs when we type ls. That's cool, but we didn't type /bin/ls. So why does it run /bin/ls? And the reason for this is what's known as the path. And this exists on both Unix and Windows systems. And it might not be called path on Windows. I think it is, though. But the path is a listing of directories that your shell will look into if it's trying to figure out a command. So the first thing that you type on the command line is almost always going to be interpreted as a command. So ls will be interpreted as command. There are some exceptions to the rule, but when you run into those, you'll kind of know it. For instance, I have an alias set up for the custom way that I like to use ls, and when you type which-l, which is the name of my alias, it'll give you nothing back. So you can use type l, and it will tell you that l is alias to ls-l. So if which gives you nothing, then fall back and use the command type. But now that we've talked about the path, let's actually see what it is. So we've had environment variables before. We used them for configuration a lot inside of Docker. And there are multiple environment variables that are already set up for you. One of those is path. So you can look at an environment variable by saying echo, and then if you use the $sign in front of the environment variable, that's how you can access its contents. So mine is pretty long because it has a lot of this Ruby stuff in there. So there's a specific Ruby bin. And if we get past all of those, yeah, so everything from this point on is not Ruby. And let's just take a look at what we've got here. So we have a bin directory inside of user explorer bin, which I might have, I don't know, but I like to give this as an option for myself. And the bin stands for binary, I think. But this is where you'll see a lot of executables. There's bin, there's sbin, but the ordering here is important. So this user explorer's bin is the first one, and then every time we see a, whoops, didn't want to do that. Every time we see a colon, that is starting a new path. So I have my local bin, then I have USR local bin, then I apparently have that twice, which that's kind of silly, but then there's USR bin, and then just /bin. So this /bin was where we were finding ls. If I were to put an executable in any of these paths before /bin that were named ls, we would actually use that other one. That's why the which is handy in case you run into a situation where you have multiple of the same executable on your machine, but they're in different locations. You can see that, oh, I'm actually using the wrong ls, which ls is one that's almost never going to be wrong, but there are a lot of situations where your path can be in the wrong order, and so you won't be using the right version of what you think you're using. And that happens a lot if you don't want to use a system installed tool. You want to use a newer version of it, but you don't want to change the system installed tool. You can install something new, and if you're on Mac, a lot of times you'll be using something like Homebrew, and that'll all go into USR local bin, which comes before the defaults of /bin and /sbin. But essentially what happens, every time we type a command onto the command line, it will go through and see if it can find that executable in one of these directories. So it'll start in my Ruby stuff and miss most of these Rubies, obviously, but then it'll hit my local bin. If it can't find it, moves to USR local bin. If it can't find it, moves to USR local bin again, which is silly, and so on and so forth until it does find it, or it will raise an error for you. So if I try to call the PB&J executable for peanut butter jelly, it's not going to find anything because that's not really a computer's job. And it will give you a command saying command not found. And when you run into this error, which you will undoubtedly run into this error, it either means that the executable you're looking for is not in your path, or it means that you misspelled something, which is normally the case. Now that you know where we're getting access to these magic words that are just executables inside of directories somewhere, and the path is what lets us get to them, the other thing you're probably going to want to know is how you can figure out how to use these things. And there are two main ways that I figured these things out. And those are man for man pages or manual pages, and then a specific flag that I can attempt most times to most executables, then that is --help. So let's take a look at PWD and see how this one works. So if you say man, this will try to look for a man page, and then you give it a command. So if we man PWD, it'll give us this actual manual. And it says, tells you what it does, tells you the flags that you can give to it, and then gives you a longer description, and then an actual description of these flags too. And a special thing about man pages is that they're a scrollable, like essentially a page, and the way you scroll through them is by using J on your keyboard. Every time you type it, you'll go down a line. K will go up, and then when you want to quit, you hit Q. And these are Vim key bindings. So if we ever cover Vim in the future, you'll see these things again. But just know that there is a way to get out of them, and Q for quit is the way that you get out of a man page. So that's the first way, but some things don't have man pages, just because they're kind of, you have to go about making them your own, like on your own if you're the one who creates the tool. So other things have a --help flag. I think Docker might have both. Nope. Okay. So there's no manual entry for Docker, but Docker does have --help. And this gives you a very similar style output, except for it's not in the man page itself. So there's none of that special scrolling using J and K, but it tells you, okay, this is a particular flag that you can send me with a default, and then I need to stop doing that. And then it will do this particular thing. So these are helpful. Like, you can explore quite a bit and figure these things out for yourself. And just know that you're going to run into errors. Most of the time, you're not going to do things that's going to be detrimental to your machine. There are occasions when that can happen, and if that is the case and you're worried about that, then feel free to start up an Ubuntu container using Docker, like we've done times before. So if you do a docker run --rm -it Ubuntu, and then just bash, this will put you into a container that you can play around with and just use the shell and find the tools that are on Ubuntu. And then if you do something wrong, you're not going to hurt your own machine. So if you are paranoid about that and are kind of worried that you're going to mess something up, then I would encourage you to just run it inside of a container until you feel comfortable. I really hope this wasn't boring for you. I think the shell and the command line are awesome tools that I use every day a lot. And I think a lot of people are a little intimidated by them, but honestly, this is a tool that if you use and you learn and you really get to understand what's going on here, this will help you be more productive in your programming. This will help you, and if you turn programming into a career, or if you have a career in programming, I can almost guarantee you will be more productive at whatever it is that you're doing if you learn how to use the command line. I hope you like this tutorial. If you didn't, let me know. If you did, I would also like you to let me know. But be sure to follow the blog, and so you can get all that written content that goes along with this in case I flew over something in a weird way. Don't forget to subscribe on the various social media channels, so Facebook, Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube if you'd like, and also head over to the website and hop on the newsletter, which has different content than just me doing tutorials.